Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Double Entertainment. My name is Alexander Petrie, and I know it's been a while, but it's been all for the right reasons. I'll get back to that after I go through this list. Much like any other cinephile, I am an addict to the Criterion Collection, and I am going to be honest, I own more DVDs than I probably could afford. However, as much as I love the Criterion Collection, I can't help but question their additions such as The Breakfast Club and Tootsie, and recently they announced they will be adding Walt Disney's WALL-E to the collection. So today, I prepared a list of 10 films that I believe should be in the Criterion Collection. At number 10, any film by Gaspar Noe. Gaspar Noe has left an imprint on the face of cinema and has resonated with countless moviegoers. Having directed films such as Enter the Void and Irreversible, his voice as a filmmaker is loud, harsh, and distinctive. I've mentioned it before on this channel, but I feel as though it's worth mentioning again. My introduction to Gaspar Noe was at the age of 19 when I waltzed into an AMC theater completely blind on what to expect from what I was going to see. That movie was Climax, and it did to me what 2001: A Space Odyssey did to audiences back in 1968. I also would like to give a special shout out to Lux Eterna, which I was also blessed with having the honors of seeing on the big screen and with half the runtime. It very much had the same effect. Seriously, why aren't there any Gaspar Noe movies in the Criterion Collection? I can't even find a Region 1 DVD copy of Lux Eterna. At number 9, Natural Born Killers. Directed by Oliver Stone, Natural Born Killers was sold to Stone by a young Quentin Tarantino, but once the veteran Stoner director got his hands on it, it became something completely different from what Tarantino had in mind. For starters, it's no secret that Oliver Stone was, well, a stoner. He was kicking a coke habit while writing the script for Scarface. He took illicit substances with Billy Hayes and Brad Davis when Mainnet Express was making its rounds at award ceremonies, and well, apparently he was popping shrooms like candy while working on this marvelously unhinged masterpiece. Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis star as Mickey and Mallory Knox, a loving serial killer couple who break away from their abusive parents and drive around America seeking their next victims, gaining a cult-like following in the process, thanks especially to a news reporter who specializes in interviewing serial killers, played by Robert Downey Jr. with an Australian accent. But that's still just the beginning. On the tails is a perverted, rapist, alcoholic detective, Jack Scagnetti, who brings the couple to justice under the care of Warden Dwight McCluskey, played by a cartoonishly unhinged Tommy Lee Jones, making his role as Two-Face seem mellow and subdued. Natural Born Killers is an entertainingly balls-to-the-wall, batshit crazy satire on America's obsession with true crime, the media's tendency to glamorize what otherwise shouldn't be, all wrapped up with stunning visuals and a killer soundtrack featuring the one and only Leonard Cohen. At number 8, The Servant from 1963. Directed by Joseph Losey and starring the devilishly charming Dirk Bogarde as the titular servant, this is another film I saw in theaters completely unaware of what to expect. When an upper-class British socialite moves into a new home, he hires a servant named Hugo Barrett. At first, Barrett is a disciplined and respectful servant, but has a sinister motive and isn't as innocent and well-mannered as he would have you believe at first sight. He then digs his claws into Tony and drags him into a world of drugs, alcohol, and debauchery. If you feel as though I've given away too much, trust me, there are plenty of twists and turns to be found in the film that I didn't mention here. The Servant is an amazing masterpiece of British cinema, and just to see the transformation of Dirk Bogarde from Alfred Pennyworth to James Dean is worth it alone. At number 7, Plague Dogs. If you thought Watership Down was devastating, wait until you see Plague Dogs. Based on the novel by Richard Adams, who also wrote the novel Watership Down, and directed by Martin Rosen, who also directed the film adaptation of Watership Down, Plague Dogs is a gut-wrenching and heartbreaking story of two dogs who escaped from a laboratory where they were grossly neglected, abused, and experimented on. They then try to survive out in the wilderness. Fearing that the two escaped dogs are carrying the bubonic plague, scientists reach out to the military, who then set out on a mission to capture and kill the two helpless animals. I'm a huge fan of Watership Down and Plague Dogs, the books and the movies. While Richard Adams denies any outright hidden political messages in his novel Watership Down, it's a bit more difficult to deny there's any in Plague Dogs. Plague Dogs is a heavy-hearted tale of friendship, survival, abandonment, neglect, and shines a harsh light on the cruel treatment to animals. At number 6, Mainnet Express. Directed by Alan Parker and written by Oliver Stone, based on the memoir of Billy Hayes, Brad Davis stars as Billy Hayes in this intense dramatization of the real-life story of Billy Hayes. Mainnet Express tells the story of a young American who travels to Turkey and attempts to smuggle hashish, an illegal drug, into the United States. However, he is caught before he even steps foot onto the plane and is taken to a Turkish prison where he is severely beaten and tortured. Despite the real-life Billy Hayes stating that some of the film's elements were blown out of proportion, I still consider Mainnet Express an absolute masterpiece. I must have seen this film 100 times, and each time I watch it, my emotional response remains the same as the first time. At number 5, Wake in Fright. Released in 1971, then lost, then rediscovered, Wake in Fright is a brutal and unrelenting thriller set in the Outback. Based on the novel by Kenneth Cook, Gary Bond stars as John Grant, an upper-class school teacher who's merely working to pay off some debts he owes the bank. Stranded in the fictional blue-collar town of Bandanyaba, with the school year now over, his one goal is to make it back to Sydney, where he can reunite with his fiancée. That is until he runs in with a local sheriff who buys him several beers and entices him to try his luck at gambling. Obviously, like most people who get carried away with gambling, John loses every cent he has, and without a place to stay or go, he finds himself relying on the kindness of strangers in the Yaba. He meets new friends who drag him into a world of heavy drinking and kangaroo hunting, leading to one of the single most disturbing and depraved scenes ever put to film. Wake in Fright is a terrifying film that tackles heavy subject matter in an unflinching light, and seeing somebody, anybody, suffer such a heavy downfall is incredibly disturbing. I'd also like to shine a spotlight on the always spectacular Donald Pleasance. Although I already mentioned this the last time I discussed Wake in Fright, I'd still like to give y'all the heads up. Wake in Fright is good, and I do recommend it, but you will see a real-life kangaroo hunt, and it is brutal. Director Ted Kotcheff was actually encouraged by the Australian Humane Society for Animals to tag along on a kangaroo hunt for the sole purpose of capturing footage for the film. At number 4, literally any film by Werner Herzog. Werner Herzog has got to be the ultimate maverick filmmaker, making his first film by literally stealing equipment from a school after dropping out. His productions are as elaborate and dangerous as his films are, whether encouraging Christian Bale to eat live maggots or dragging a full-scale steamship up a mountain in the Amazon rainforest. Werner Herzog has put his life and the lives of everybody into production at risk, creating some of the most epic and visually stunning films. While I don't condone subjecting a cast and crew to dangerous situations, unless they volunteer themselves, I consider Werner Herzog a major inspiration. Having taken his masterclass when I was a senior in high school, he flipped my views on filmmaking completely upside down. I'm honestly shocked that the Criterion Collection doesn't have any Herzog films, especially considering they featured the making of his film Fitzcarraldo. As you can tell, my hair is a fucking mess, and I'm wearing a completely different shirt because while I was editing this video, I realized that my mic was a little fucked and I changed the batteries, so I have to re-record these next 3 entries, so thank you very much for your patience. At number 3, THX 1138. Before Star Wars, there was THX 1138. George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola were budding filmmakers during the late 60s when American cinema began to shift away from the studio system and started to take interest in independent cinema. Seeing the opportunity, Francis Ford Coppola opted to start his own company, Zoetrope, which would help finance the films of his fellow indie cinema colleagues, one of whom was George Lucas. What started off as a small short film project for school swiftly ballooned into a feature film and started the career of George Lucas. Starring Robert Duvall, THX 1138 is a shockingly bleak and cold look at a dystopian future where humans are no longer seen necessarily as individuals with names and dreams, but instead are given numbers and are just used as machines. This is helped immensely by keeping everybody doped up on pills. When 2 individuals decide to ditch the pills and fall in love, they are taken prisoner, where they then decide to escape. Featuring the likes of Donald Pleasance and a very young Sid Haig, THX 1138 is a deep, bleak, and insightful science fiction piece of art house cinema, which was ironically created by one of the most marketable filmmakers who would then go on to sell his property to an evil monopoly. At number 2, Silent Waters. I actually covered this film on my channel almost 2 years ago, so if you want to learn more about it, go back and check it out. Directed by Pakistani female director Sabiha Sumar, set in 1979, a widow mother doing her best to raise her family and give young women in the village a proper education struggles with the son as he becomes an active Islamic military extremist, which also brings up her past trauma. I got super lucky as I serendipitously caught this on television when I had a friend come over and immediately bought myself a DVD copy. The film was emotionally hard-hitting, and being someone who spent a lot of time in Israel, neighboring Arabic territory, I really connected with this film. Also today we have a special guest, my little baby, Faraday. For today, we don't have one, but two honorable mentions. For our first honorable mention, Dalton Trumbo's Johnny Got His Gun. Written and directed by Dalton Trumbo, who also wrote the novel, which I highly encourage you to check out, Johnny Got His Gun, along with Platoon, is one of the very few war films I feel confident in calling anti-war. Joe is a young and idealistic soldier who, while serving the United States in World War I, is horribly maimed and mutilated on the battlefield to the point he has no arms, legs, eyes, or ears. Unable to see, hear, or speak, he is kept alive, stuck in a living nightmare. Throughout the film, there are flashbacks from his childhood to the very day he was injured on the battlefield. There are also dreams in which Jesus, played by Donald Sutherland, turns his back on the young Joe. Although a couple of the dream sequences take away from the emotional intensity of the rest of the film is still an absolutely devastating look at not only the horrors of war, but also of human suffering in general. A couple of weeks ago, I spent 5 days in the hospital for a 5-day EEG. Outside of a seizure coming into the hospital, I was as healthy as a horse, the staff was great, and the food was amazing, but still, being bedridden in a hospital for more than a night was trying, making me all the more emotionally sympathetic towards Joe. For our second honorable mention, Last Summer. Written and directed by husband and wife team Frank and Eleanor Perry, Frank being the director and Eleanor adapting the novel by Evan Hunter to the screen. Last Summer stars Barbara Hershey as Sandy, the ideal girl next door who meets two friends, Peter and Dan, played by Willard's Bruce Davidson, while vacationing at a beach house. The three all work together to help nurse an injured seal back to health. The three then go on to have fun, drink, and fuck. As the film progresses, and with a seagull out of the picture, a new kid's in town, Rhoda, played amazingly by the super underrated Catherine Burns, who unfortunately would only appear in 2 other theatrically released films. The three rambunctious teens decide to take the geeky and introverted Rhoda under their wings, trying to get her to swim, drink, and dress like all the other kids. Spoiler alert, kids are jerks, and they treat Rhoda like shit. Last Summer is an incredibly upsetting and disturbing film as it sets you up for a standard coming-of-age romance film, only to say fuck you to the audience and jump tracks once Rhoda enters the picture. That, and it's an amazing look at how some people are either born evil or can be manipulated. At number 1, Possession. Directed by Andrzej Zulowski, Sam Neill and Isabella Gianni star as a husband and wife on the brink of divorce. And oh yeah, they are both batshit crazy, and Isabella Gianni is fucking a tentacle monster. And that's pretty much the plot without going into detail. The acting alone is superb. Now I have seen a number of movies where I couldn't help but think, that director was totally tripping balls when they made this. This is one of those rare examples where, well, I was thinking the same thing, only this time it's the actors who are high. We all know divorce can be troublesome, but this takes things to a whole new level. Not to mention this was shot in 1981 when the Berlin Wall was still up. Between the cinematography and acting, the moment the film starts, it takes you by the collar and doesn't stop spinning you around long till the credits roll. The creature design and effect is definitely something else and will make you say, what the fuck is that? There are several incredibly disturbing scenes scattered throughout, and even if you haven't watched it from start to finish, I'm pretty sure you all saw the subway scene. Fun fact, I actually saw this in New York City at midnight, and my friend was so happy and festive, he insisted on buying me a few drinks at the bar, and well, 6 shots of Japanese whiskey later, it sure as hell made for a memorable movie-going experience.